Chapter 8, The Clockwork Sleigh. Mr. Penguin yelped and nearly leapt out of his skin. "Shh," hissed the shoulder tapper. "You'll start an avalanche." Mr. Penguin, Colin, Edith, and Gordon whipped around to see who or what was speaking to them. They discovered two small humans, both bundled up in an extraordinary array of knitwear and standing knee-deep in the snow. "We've come to rescue you," said the boy human. He pulled his scarf away from his mouth with a glove-covered hand and grinned broadly. "We saw your plane crash into the mountain from our attic." The girl human pushed back her bobble hat to reveal a shock of blonde hair and two rosy cheeks. "We were looking through our telescope," she said, "and making notes about the fortress." The boy elbowed her in the ribs and interrupted, "Making notes about the, stars." "Yes, stars," the girl said loudly. Mr. Penguin decided they must be brother and sister, because they looked so alike. Were they twins? "And we spotted your plane," she added. "We managed to escape before it crashed," Mr. Penguin said, finding his voice at last. "We used some big knickers as parachutes." The two children blinked, then said together, "A very good idea." "But you can't stay out here all night. You'll freeze to death," said the boy. "You should come back to our house." Mr. Penguin was goggle-eyed. "Is it safe?" he wondered. The children seemed very helpful, and he did always find it difficult not to trust someone in jazzy knitwear. He looked at Colin, who shrugged and held up his pad with a question mark. "Stop." Sorry about that, timer. "Our village is just down there. Look," said the girl, pointing down the slope. Now that some of the smoke from the crashed airplane had cleared, Mr. Penguin could see lots of little lights twinkling from a hodgepodge of buildings clinging to the side of the mountain. "Come on," cried the boy. "We live in a bakery, and there are warm beds and thick sweaters and as much piping hot cocoa as you can drink." There was no mention of fish finger sandwiches, but Mr. Penguin decided to wait until he knew the children better before bringing up that subject. As the adventuring gang followed the children through the snow, Mr. Penguin made sure that the stone was still in his satchel. It was, but it did now have a tiny crack on the side from the crash. Mr. Penguin hoped that Professor Stoutgirdle wouldn't notice it and put the stone safely back in his bag. Are we walking all the way to the village?" asked Mr. Penguin, who suddenly found himself up to his bow tie in snow. Colin rescued him, as always. "Of course not," cried the girl. "We're going to go in my clockwork sleigh." And suddenly a curious contraption stood before them. It looked like the sort of sleigh Santa Claus rode in, but with no reindeer. Instead, its sides were made up of cogs, wheels, and mechanical moving parts. The two children helped the adventurers into the machine and tucked their knees under a snuggly wool blanket. "My sister made this," said the boy proudly, as the girl busied herself turning an enormous metal key. "She's a whiz with anything mechanical. In the morning, she'll have a look at your plane and see if she can fix it." Mr. Penguin was just about to say thank you when the girl turned around in her seat and beamed at them. "Everyone ready?" she asked gleefully. They all nodded, and with a pull of a lever, the sleigh shuddered and began rising up into the air on great metal clockwork legs. And there's a picture of the sleigh and its legs. To Mr. Penguin's disbelief, the sleigh started walking down the mountain through the thick, crunchy snow as easily as he would waddle around the streets of Cityville. And the next chapter, chapter 9, is Schneiderdorf on the Peak.